please silence your other communication devices, such as your cell or desk phone, so that there aren't disruptions during the meeting. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom, except for board members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. That means you will not be able to mute or unmute your lines manually. After each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. For those on Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on the raise hand button. If you are using Zoom on your smartphone, please tap the raise hand button on the bottom of the screen. For those calling in using the phone line only, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to comment. Your name will be called when it is your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes for the entirety of the items on the agenda and 3 minutes for the non-agenda items. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. Please note you can hang up and/or leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being dropped from the meeting. And with that, Vice Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, fantastic. Let's go ahead and have our roll call.
I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. Supervisor Bartlett, absent. Senator Delgado?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McKellen? Absent. Board Member Padilla Campos?
Present.
Co-Chair Buscaino? Absent. Co-Chair Richardson?
I am here. Thank you. All right, so welcome to our second meeting of our Marine Ports Committee. Today, we will receive an update on the status of negotiations on the MOU between the ports of Long Beach, Los Angeles, and South Coast Air Quality Management District. At the last meeting, we requested an update on the readiness and demand of zero emission, near zero trucks. And we're glad that staff, particularly Matt Miyasato, has worked to assemble some guests who can speak to us about the readiness. So that's a special treat, I think, that we'll be able to hear and get some questions answered about the real technical feasibility and readiness of truck orders. Next, I want to make it clear that at the last meeting, there was a request for public comment to happen at the beginning. I'm going to accommodate that. We're going to take some public comment at the very beginning, a limited amount of public comment at the beginning before we get into our presentation, and then we'll conclude public comment at the end. And so let's go ahead and get started. I do have a disclosure statement for agenda items number 1A through 1C. I do not have a financial interest, but I am required to identify for the record that I'm the Vice Mayor for the City of Long Beach, which is involved in these items. So I want to go and none of these items require motions today. These are all presentations and discussions. So I want to go ahead and pass it off to staff for item 1A.
I'm sorry, Co-Chair, were you going to take public comment or?
Yes, I thought you were going to introduce the item and then we do public comment.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Based on the Co-Chair's comments, he asked for staff to present on two things in particular. What is the market readiness and demand for the new technologies of trucks, namely zero emissions and near zero emissions? So I have a few slides, Co-Chair, that I'd like to present on what we see as the demand based on our incentive programs. And then we have lined up some OEMs and the truck dealerships to speak to the second question, which is really what is the readiness, delivery timeline, capacity, et cetera.
All right, so I think we should jump in.
Okay, very good.
Let's go ahead and jump in.
Slides up. We can bring the slides up for the marking readiness and demand. Next slide, please. So what we wanted to do is provide an overview of the universe, as it were, of the demand that we see from our incentive programs. And this is based on the four major ones that you hear of each time we discuss our programs, and that is really looking at Prop 1B, which is a good movement, $1 billion that was devoted to the districts to provide for upgrade of trucks. There's a Carl Moyer program, which is the traditional incentive program, the VW mitigation consent program, and then finally the Mobile Source Emission Reduction Review Committee. And this is about 2016 through present, the awards that have been made by this board. So if you look at the number of units, we have dark blue is the near zero emission technologies that have been awarded, and the light blue is zero emission technologies. So just in general, if you look at that, it's about 100 million for Prop 1B, 15 million for Moyer, 25 million or so and change for VW, and then MSRC recently just over 20 million. I want to point out, though, that if you look at the number of units, clearly the near zero, there's been demand for those because, if you look at the funding, there's just been a good response for those types of technologies. I also want to point out for Prop 1B, there was the opportunity for fleets to choose the zero emission technology, and many of them did. However, due to the inability to deliver in a timeframe that was acceptable for the fleets, about 164 of those have changed over to the near zero technology. If you go to the next slide, it may be more illuminating if you look at only drayage. That's all vocations. That's called trash haulers, freight vehicles. But this slide really addresses only drayage trucks, but it's a similar story. We're getting a significant demand for near zero technology and some for zero emission technology. If you can go back to the drayage slide, please. The next slide. There you go. But the only thing to point out here is the number of units. So 300 for near zero and Prop 1B, and 55 units for the zero. But if you look at the funding amounts, that just speaks to zero emission technologies are much more expensive. I also want to point out that of these awards, right, these are awards by the board, about 200 of these trucks have been delivered. Those have all been near zero emission technologies. No zero emission technologies have yet been delivered. If you go to the next slide. So what we wanted to do is just tee up for the committee at your request, the number the perspective from the manufacturers as well as the dealers. Now, so we've lined up Tom Swenson from Cummins. So Cummins is, as you may recall, the engine manufacturer of the near zero emission technology. And we've also got two dealerships lined up. So Lacey Robertson from Rush Peterbilt, and then we've got Bob Carrick, I believe is here, or he was slated to be here for Vehicle Velocity Group. And they sell Freightliner technologies, but we also have two of the OEMs, so Jed Proctor from Daimler and Arvin Callis from Volvo, and they can speak to the zero emission technologies. So if we could go ahead and have Tom speak first.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Matt?
We can hear you, Tom. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So thanks for having me. So just maybe to start. So I'm Tom Swenson, and I'm business development manager with Cummins. And as Matt mentioned, that we're a manufacturer of the heavy duty engines, including advanced diesel and natural gas. And we're also heavily invested in battery electric and hydrogen. So I wanted to provide some information to the committee regarding our ability to produce and deliver ultra low NOx natural gas trucks or engines. Cummins offers 3 versions right now of low NOx natural gas engines, and those range for applications from medium duty box trucks all the way up to 80,000 pound semi truck. And then we've also deployed some of these engines into the overweight corridor, which has applications up to 96,000 pounds. And all of these engines are in normal, regular production alongside their diesel counterparts. And they're built in New York and in our North Carolina plants. And then on the truck side, they're also in normal and regular production, and they're offered in Freightliner, Kenworth, Mack, Peterbilt, and Volvo in a variety of configurations, including day cabs and sleepers. So Cummins, along with our truck manufacturer partners, can produce and deliver any quantity of natural gas trucks ordered by customers. In fact, hundreds of these natural gas trucks have already been delivered to fleets operating in the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles on a daily basis. And then I'll also note that yesterday we had a major announcement confirming our investment in natural gas engines. We plan to bring a 15-liter natural gas ultra low NOx engine to market in the 2024 timeframe. Because the trucks, regardless of the fuel type, are custom configured to each fleet's specific duty cycle, trucks aren't built until an order is received from the customer. This allows the truck manufacturer and Cummins to tailor the powertrain and other features to maximize fleet satisfaction. So simply put, we have the ability to build the trucks with no minimum order requirement or maximum limit. However, an order is required to initiate the build process. And I guess in short, an order never placed is a truck never delivered. And I'd be happy to field any questions if the committee has any.
Tom, this is Matt. Sorry, before the committee asks any question, I think that they previously had the question about delivery timeframes.
Yeah, so from the engine perspective, we don't have any. We can deliver on any time frame that's necessary. The challenge that we're having right now, and I think the truck OEM folks that are on the line can better address it, is really finding a build slot for the truck to put the engine into, and those have been quite tight as demand has been really exceeded sort of all of our predictions. Plus we've run into just supply chain issues that have limited build slots. But really they're better suited to address that question than I am. It's not from the engine manufacturer perspective. We're meeting the order demand from the OEMs.
Thank you.
Sorry, are these just near zero?
Hang on, board member. We're gonna get through the rest of the presentation. We're gonna let the public get their comments before we start deliberation. Is there any more presentation, Mr. Musa?
We have other speakers, but
I just wanted a clarification from the speaker.
Okay, I'm jotting down notes. How many more speakers do we have in the presentation, Matt?
we have 4 more.
Great, let's go through the whole presentation and then we'll take public comment, then we'll take our council discussion.
Very good. If we
Thank
could have Lacey Robertson unmuted and she can speak to the dealership perspective.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name is Lacey Robertson and I represent Rush Enterprises. We're the largest commercial vehicle dealership group in the country. And the OEMs that we represent include Peterbilt, Navistar, Isuzu, Hino, and Ford. As Tom previously spoke to, we're in an unprecedented market situation where truck production, i.e. availability, is significantly constrained across the board, regardless of the fuel type of the truck. OEMs are not able to keep up with the current demand, so delivery timelines are extended for all new trucks, whether they're diesel, natural gas, or electric. This is due to shortages across the supply chain, everything from chips, labor, parts, freight, dashboards, seats, everything. Timeline and production capacity are the same for new diesel and new near zero natural gas trucks. Demand outpaces supply for both. In the next 2 years, OEMs are ramping up production of zero emission vehicles. So production volume of those trucks will be limited. This production will also be limited by the same factors that are impacting diesel and near zero natural gas trucks. So production could be further delayed. for delivery of zero emission trucks. We are open to take orders for any truck type and fuel type. They will all just have a protracted delivery timeline.
Okay, thank you, Lacey. Next up, we're going to hear from Jed Proctor. He's a manager for customer consulting at for e-mobility at Daimler Trucks North America. So if you can unmute Jed, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for the time. My name is Jed Proctor, and I'm from our e-mobility group at Daimler Trucks North America. We believe that we continue to see strong customer interest for zero emissions technologies. We will go into series production with our battery electric vehicles in October of 2022. We've been open to take orders for those vehicles since April of this year. And if you place orders today, our current production timeline estimate is somewhere in mid-2023. We're committed to this technology and we will scale production as required by market demand, but we believe we have production capacity to satisfy what we see as the market demand in the next few years.
Great, thanks, Jed. Sorry, I had to find my mute button. And then next up, we have Dr. Arvind Kalis from Volvo. He's the Advanced Technology Policy Director. So please unmute Arvind.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just making sure that you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks.
Yep. Good to look at some familiar faces. Thanks, Matt, for the introduction, and thank you all for having the Volvo Group at this table. I am based out of Southern California. As Matt pointed out, I'm the Advanced Technology Policy Director for Volvo Group North America. And just for context, Volvo Group delivers sustainable transport and infrastructure solutions, offering trucks, buses, construction equipment, power solutions for marine and industrial applications, financing, and other services for our customers. Electromobility is extremely important to us, and so is sustainability. It's part of our DNA. And we got started in North America thanks to the California Climate Investments Program and the investments made by AQMD. I'm talking about the Volvo Lights program that has been instrumental in developing the critical ecosystem that is needed for successfully deploying electric trucks in the real world. The good news is that these trucks are already in customer operations. They have, I think, aggregated more than 150,000 miles. There's about 25 of them in a variety of different applications, and they've been in operation for over 18 months. They're getting good feedback. The Volvo VNR Electric comes in 3 configurations: the straight truck, the 4x2, and the 6x2 day cab tractors. The drivetrain is rated at 455 horsepower, and it offers up to 150 miles in range, 120 to 150 miles, and it's capable of reaching speeds of 65 miles per hour. We're building all our trucks in our Virginia-based plant and taking orders today. And that's all the good news. But here's the reality check. In addition to the readiness of the vehicle technology, having the necessary vehicle and infrastructure incentives and sufficient charging infrastructure will be equally important to grow this market, this very nascent market. More importantly, the economics and operations of drayage fleets are very unique and very different from the typical regional haul operations. Only a small portion of the Volvo Lights routes and applications focus on drayage, and we can talk a little bit more about that during the discussion. So in conclusion, while programs like the Volvo Lights are just the beginning, long-term commitments from state agencies and creative industry solutions are needed to sustain the growth of zero-emission solutions, especially for the drayage fleets. Thanks, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Arvind. And then Chairman Richardson, just one more speaker, and that is Robert Carrick. He is from Vehicle Velocity Group, is the largest Freightliner dealer, I believe, in the United States. I think Bob is in the attendees. If you could unmute him, allow him to speak.
Robert's been moved over as a panelist, can unmute himself, Matt. There you go.
I've unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now, Bob. Thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hey, I apologize. Somehow I didn't get this invitation, so I did not prepare any remarks, but I know that I just got on in time to hear Jed Proctor from Daimler give his update on the EVs. And we're certainly pushing those products very, very hard. We've got charging infrastructure in place in 2 of our major facilities, and we're planning on another one here in the next 6 months. So that's all coming along very, very well. As Jed said, the vehicles will be available in mid-2023. So we're out about 18 months right now. We are open to taking orders. We've got stock orders in place in our dealerships, so we can deliver just as soon as these vehicles are available. And on the other side of the equation, the natural gas products, we're selling thousands of them now. They are available today. The problem is with all of the other supply chain issues, we're actually out a year. If you order one today, it takes a year to get, which is almost up to where the electric vehicles are. So one of the things we've watched over the last few years is a lot of people said natural gas vehicles were not available. Well, they're not available if you don't order them. Okay. If you order them, you get the vehicles. And up until about 6 months ago, you could get about a 6-month lead time to get these vehicles. And, with the near zero engines and renewable natural gas, these vehicles are a great complement to the EVs that we're talking about putting in the ports today. So thank you for the invitation. Again, I'm sorry I didn't have any prepared remarks.
That concludes the speaker list, Chairman.
All right, thank you, Matt, and thank you to all our speakers. I heard Cummins, I heard Velocity Vehicle Group with Freightliner, I heard Volvo, Daimler, and Lacey. Thank you so much. What we're gonna do at this point, and please hang around because you're gonna have questions from the board. What we're gonna do right now, we're gonna take public comment on this item. I see there's 3 people with hands up on public comments, well, 4. So we'll do a public comment right now, and then we're gonna open it up for board member comments. So I see Elliot Gonzalez is up first.
Great. Yes, I just wanted to encourage the board to support a strong ISR. I thought that it was essential that an ISR be adopted when we were talking about regulating warehouses. Same thing with our ports. Our ports are one of the largest sources of emissions, mainly by the trucking, or especially by the trucking industry. But before that's how I feel about that. I just really wanted to make a point that I've said in front of this body several times. I will continue to say it, and I really want you all to take note of what the public is requesting. There is no such thing as near zero. This is not a game of horseshoes. That is a vague term, near zero. What does that mean? Near zero, what does that mean? What is the source of energy for this vehicle? Okay, natural gas, methane. I don't know about a renewable source. I have not seen a renewable source that can power the entire fleet that we use for our manufacturing and industry here in California. But just call it gas, methane gas. This is a potent greenhouse gas, one that is 30 to 120 times the effect of CO2, more potent than CO2. So please stop using this vague term. It is inaccurate. It is not supported by science, and you're not communicating on goodwill and trust with the community by using words that we continue to ask you not use, and use only scientifically accurate terms. It is called methane gas. No such thing as near zero. In fact, when we call for zero emission, we can also just call that electric. So the difference in energy sources is one is electric energy, the other is natural gas, methane gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Matt Trapp.
Thank you, committee members and Executive Director Nastri, for the opportunity to comment here. Just briefly, I promise not to take the entire 3 minutes. And I think that the main focus of this informational item is really around the ability of the OEMs to deliver equipment in a timely fashion. I think you heard, especially on the dealership side, from Bob and Lacey at Rush Truck Centers and Bob from Velocity Vehicle Group, that we're facing right now a global supply chain crisis, which is limiting the amount of materials that are able to be made available for production of heavy duty equipment. And as Tom from Cummins alluded to, they might be able to build the engines, but they aren't building the engines unless they get the orders from the truck manufacturers. And the truck manufacturers aren't building the trucks and placing the order with Cummins unless they get the orders from the dealerships. And my members who have been looking at all different platforms, energy platforms, if you will, for heavy duty equipment, are being told by those dealerships that these vehicles are, and Bob alluded to it, 1 year, and in some instances would not even be available until 2023 for delivery. That being the natural gas fueled, the renewable natural gas fueled engines that we're talking about here, and sometimes referred to as near zero or low NOx. So I think it's important to really understand that while there's still a lead time for the zero emission platform, while we're staring headlong into a deadline on January 1st, 2023, for at least in the drayage sector, over 6,000 vehicles that are going to be out of compliance, who would want to replace with either electric or natural gas, or for that matter, new diesel, cannot get those trucks in time. And the challenges surrounding orders stem from the ability of that particular carrier to place the order via and included some type of deposit that goes on top of it. So there's many issues that prevent people from placing timely orders, but the longer they wait, the longer it's going to take to get that truck in service. But I think you heard clearly that, and again, my members have heard the same thing. Even if you tried to order a truck today, zero emissions is one thing. That's 2023 pretty much across the board. Diesel or natural gas, you won't see those vehicles for over a year. And so it's challenging to try to plan your business when you cannot secure the equipment to do so. So I promise not to take up the whole time, so I'll end my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Next, we have Angie B.
Hi, folks. This is actually Yasi again. I share an account with Angie, and I'm a senior campaign representative with the Sierra Club. And my comments regarding the technology presentation is, first, I feel really grateful to have industry spending time here and educating us on where they're at on the supply chain side and their plans for deployment and the successful implementation of their programs like Volvo Lights was super inspiring and empowering, and to show that advocacy for cleaner technologies does work and it does benefit global business and supply chain movement. I'm also here to just really uplift the fact that this agency still continues to prioritize combustion fueling technology more than zero emissions technology. How are we ever going to get to technology readiness if we look at slide number 2 and the vast discrepancy of this agency and of many others, CARB's trying to shift more towards zero emissions, which is great, but we're still going to continue to use fossil fuel combustion technology if we start putting our money behind it. So in this MOU process at the ports, I really want to uplift that we need to start thinking about implementation of zero emissions technology, infrastructure investments, and of course, there's going to be shortfalls. Look, we're not asking to move this technology next year or in 2 years. Many of the deadlines set by CARB are for 2030. And if we're going to continue prioritizing combustion fueling technologies, that raises a huge concern for Sierra Club and its membership. And we hope that the Air District here can look at technology as a solution to solve our public health crisis with non-attainment in ozone standards. So those are my comments for now, and I'm excited to see what the rest of the committee days look like, and definitely believe that an MOU process needs strong regulation, which is why we're actually opposed to this process, and look forward to figuring out actual rulemaking to reduce air emissions at the ports. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Fernando Gaitan.
Good
Fernando, are you
afternoon.
there?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Good afternoon. My name is Fernando Gaitan. I'm an attorney with Earth Justice. You know, with the ports now tied up, having to deal with an unprecedented backlog of ships waiting to dock and containers needing to move out, they have their hands tied. It's really time for the air district, whose job it is to protect our air, to do the job of regulating 24/7 emissions that are already coming from the reality of 24/7 port operations. While I appreciate learning about the air district's perspective on market readiness and demand for trucks, focusing solely on trucks demonstrates the inadequacy of this process. First, AQMD should be laser focused on reducing emissions from overall port operations and concerned about the impact that all activities are having on the region's air quality. While trucks certainly play a significant role in emissions, they're not the only producers of air pollution at the ports. AQMD staff are well aware of this, having proposed an inventory of equipment tied to port operations that will require emissions reductions. The goal, however, has to be to set a standard to transition to zero emissions without further delay. Interim measures that keep us tied to combustion technology at the end of the day still pollute our air. Second, the takeaway today is that incentives alone are ineffective in creating a shift to zero emissions. Equipment turnover schedules must be coupled with targeted caps on emissions with set timetables in order to make a real difference. There is no indication that the ports are even close to getting there through this process. AQMD's priorities must be aligned with those of the state, calling for a transition to zero emissions across a broad spectrum of mobile and stationary sources. Finally, it bears repeating that public health crisis that air pollution is creating at the ports doesn't pause for dialogue or negotiations. I think the slides that you're going to see from staff later say about all you need to know about the MOU process so far. Air district staff stand ready to discuss specific measures for reducing emissions. By contrast, port staff indicated that they're not ready and are unwilling to share specific details at this time. I think that pretty much sums up what you need to know about this MOU process. I call on this committee to allow staff to start preparing rulemaking that will get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more speakers, and then we're going to go back to the presentation, and we'll do another round for anyone who hasn't spoken at the end. Todd Campbell.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Todd Campbell. I represent a company called Clean Energy. We provide both renewable natural gas and hydrogen fueling infrastructure. And the question was asked, what is renewable natural gas? The reason why renewable natural gas is now a negative carbon fuel across the board in California, 100% of the vehicle fuel that's going into compressed natural gas engines is because it takes methane, organic waste methane that otherwise would enter the atmosphere, which is a short-lived climate pollutant, which is absolutely critical to fight climate change, and then takes that fuel and displaces black carbon or diesel particulate, which is another short-lived climate pollutant. In addition to that, we're preventing those emissions from getting into the atmosphere. And that's a large part of why renewable natural gas is so critical to being used in transportation. And I say it's not limited to a combustion engine. It can be used for electricity as well as hydrogen applications. The question also was asked, what is near zero? And quite simply, near zero engines are engines that are certified by the California Resources Board to emit at least 90% less than the latest diesel truck. And I would further say that in INEOS testing, it's really actually closer to 95 to 99%, depending on what pollutant you're looking at, cleaner than a diesel. So a very big difference there. Also, I just wanted to state that what happens when you don't move technology. One speaker said that there was no rush. We should wait for zero only. What happens is that we had 6,000 pre-2010 trucks down at the ports. 98%, according to I believe the South Coast Air Quality Management District, have already been replaced with 2014 or newer diesels to comply with the Clean Air Action Plan. That's a really big loss for the communities being impacted by diesel. Diesel is a known toxic air contaminant. It's the #1 source of NOx and toxic pollutions in our basin. And so that's something to consider. It's a real unfortunate outcome there and surprised that anyone representing the environmental community would advocate for delay. In terms of infrastructure, clean energy doesn't need subsidies. We don't need support. We have already, like our competitors, have a full network to support these trucks. And I would say for electric, it's a real challenge. One of our customers said they needed 119 megawatts just for their one facility of 322 vehicles. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our final speaker is Mandira Wijatunga.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Mandira. I am a climate campaigner with the Pacific Environment. I have spoke in front of this board before. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that my friend Fernando at Justice mentioned. I really appreciate all the speakers sharing the information about the trucks and the timelines. But I want to reiterate the fact that while emission from trucks has been going down, the ships and hovercraft remains to be one of the biggest polluters at the ports. So while we are talking about trucks, I think it's also important that we keep our eyes out and keep our minds on reducing the emissions from the whole port as a whole. There's a lot of bad emissions coming from hovercraft. Ocean-going vessels remains to be one of the biggest polluters, and also the other the trucks and other vehicles that is operating within the ports continue to be operated by diesel engines that continues to be harmful to people who are living close to the ports. So while we're talking about the trucks, I think it's important that we talk about the other emissions, source of emissions, and something like a stronger clean truck fund rate that can be used to renovate and upgrade the systems to zero emissions at the ports. I'm looking forward to hearing the updates on MOU. However, I want to reiterate the fact that we advocate for a stronger clean truck fund rate, higher truck fund rate. Proposal is the highest rate at 70%, and the cargo drivers diversion at $70 per TEU is predicted to be about 1.4%. I believe we can use a little bit more cargo diversion from the ports at this moment, while 50 some ships are waiting. So I want to just bring that out too, that we strongly support a stronger and a higher clean truck fund rate, maybe higher than $70 per TEU. I won't take my whole time. Thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the MOU. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you all for your public comment. Again, we'll do this at the end, and we'll go to board member comments and some questions for some of our guests. I just want to remind folks, there was a request from the community to move up, allow some public comment early. And so this is my attempt to accommodate it. It'll get better in the future. So we'll figure out how to structure it better in the future. Now, I know board member Padilla Campos had a question earlier. Now would be a good time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was really just a clarification question from the presenter, so I was a little thrown off that I wasn't allowed to ask that. But moving on, I'll just make a general comment on the presentation that we just heard by beginning to thank the staff for that presentation and also from the representatives that made time to come and speak to us today. I just want to really make clear that I don't believe that these natural gas trucks are the way to go. We should not rely solely on near zero emission trucks to reduce the number of diesel trucks on the road. We need zero emissions. Near zero emission trucks are natural gas trucks. It's a band-aid technology that won't actually lead us to emission reductions in the long term. Investing in near zero emissions would be investing in more pollution. So why would we invest in technology that actually needs to go away? Why are we so invested in natural gas when what we really need is zero emission infrastructure? As air regulators, we at AQMD need to signal to the industry that they need to do more. As the ports have been making record profits during this pandemic, we must hold them accountable to the pollution they are directly contributing to. There's a logical fallacy to continue investing in gas and diesel as we work towards our mission of clean air. And someone mentioned today that if we're not ordering them, they're not going to be built. So we need to start building these zero emission vehicles and placing the orders and getting them out to the communities and really reducing air pollution. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Board Member Delgado, anything?
I just had some clarified questions as well. I just want to make sure I understood correctly, and maybe Matt, you can just check my statements. But what I heard today from the manufacturers is if you ordered a vehicle today, it would be available in 2023. Is that correct?
What I understood, Senator, is that in some cases, if you order the natural gas truck today, it would be available in 12 months, so at the end of 2022, or even likely into 2023.
Okay. And then I heard one of the speakers make a plea for kind of public assistance to improve the output of zero emissions, near zero. And I was curious if, as a follow-up to this discussion, if each of the manufacturers could kind of give you their thoughts on what we can do to improve the situation. So I respect all the board members' opinions about this, but what I heard from the manufacturers is that there already is a backlog now for even the near zero technology. So if we were to push for electric, what do we do as a government agency to help that? Is it funding? You know, I'm looking for solutions so we can actually push to help make this situation better.
Madam Vice Chair, maybe I could interject.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have a number of the manufacturers and OEM with us, and I think that question is probably better served by asking them directly. I think we know the answer, but I think it'd be better for you to hear from them directly.
Yeah, great.
So I see Jed, and Jed, maybe you're first up.
And then we can have Arvin from Volvo can speak to that.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. So I can't comment too much on the supply chain issues currently at hand with currently available technology. Obviously, we're doing our best to acquire parts and build trucks as quickly as we can to satisfy customer demand, and that goes for both diesel and natural gas vehicles. As far as zero emissions vehicles, we're marching towards our series production, which we will start ramping up our factories next year towards the end of 2022. From a timeline perspective, we're methodically putting those vehicles through the battery of testing and validation processes that all of our vehicles go through. And as it stands right now, that's the timeline that we have, and there's no real way to shorten that timeline. However, in the time that we have between now and production is the time that the Air Quality Management District can help to get the needed infrastructure in place. One of the bottlenecks we see specifically at the ports is available charging infrastructure in and around the port facilities. Our customers would have much more confidence in running these vehicles if they were able to have confident charging locations outside of their own warehouses and depots. They're currently installing infrastructure at their own locations, but they're in need of other charging infrastructure along their daily routes. And at the port would be a massive help in order to gain confidence for them to place orders in mass. Also, a rethinking of the process of the queuing process of the port to take advantage of potentially available charging infrastructure. Those are the things that we believe would help move this forward as we are in this interim time between until technology is actually available in mass quantities.
Thank you, Jed. That's very helpful.
Dr.
Arvind?
Gillis?
Yeah. Hey, yeah, thanks, Matt and Wayne. I agree with what Jed said, and chiming in, I think just thinking about vehicle incentives and infrastructure incentives, and you heard Matt allude to the fact that these are not inexpensive products, they're new technologies, and you're putting them in the hands of people who do this for a living and who want to do this for the right reasons. So I think just recognizing that we have to try to bring down the price in the form of incentives, maybe layering on different types of incentives for the vehicle asset, I think that is something to keep in mind. I think the state is doing an outstanding job. AQMD is doing an outstanding job by making this available, but I think continued funding and sort of assurance to the early adopters and the people who are going to take this on, I think is extremely important. Infrastructure now is a new thing that people have to think about. And again, the drayage operators are not the typical regional haul, pickup and delivery kind of operators. So thinking about a little bit about their economics and where they're located, where they're going to be driving, and coming up with maybe charging hubs if behind the fence charging is not available. Some creative solutions, I think, and then working with the utility and sort of defraying the cost over there, the CapEx costs, I think that's going to go a long way. As far as the timelines, I mean, I did mention that we are taking orders today. And again, thanks to some of the state agencies, we have had good success with placing these trucks in the hands of customers. So I think we have about 200 HVIP vouchers, which will kind of go into next year. We have about 90 trucks in the form of grants, working with AQMD. So I think over the next 2 years, we have a few hundred trucks that we are likely going to put in the hands of the customer operations. Of course, supply chain issues can really throw a wrench into this and maybe extend out the timeline. But again, just placing the trucks in the hands of the customers is not the only problem. Within the Volvo Lights program, we put trucks within 4 to 6 months of production. But the infrastructure, these are behind the fence infrastructure. It took 12 to 16 to 18 months. So, and these are not the drayage operators. These are large fleets who have the luxury of having behind the fence chargers. So, I mean, if you just sort of change this framework and apply it to drayage operators, I mean, it is very complicated. So I think we just need to work together to make sure that this can be used by the drayage operators. So again, I'm thinking with the supply chains and everything else that I know, that we know, I think anywhere between 6 to 8 months, we can put the truck. As I mentioned, the 90 plus 220 vouchers, assuming we can match that to the customer, we're looking at these many trucks over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Vice Chair, if I may just add one quick data point, is that when staff is pushing for an available commercial technology, we're really talking about scale. So we are, as you know, we're working like gangbusters on deploying zero emission trucks with Volvo, Daimler, Peterbilt, Kenworth, all of the major manufacturers, and we're on the ground doing infrastructure. But they're only going to provide up to 1,000 trucks in the next 2 years. You just heard Volvo say 200 or so, Daimler saying around the same number. But you heard from Tom from Cummins, they can produce 1,000 engines a month. So we can get more scale if we can do this 90% cleaner technology. And that's why we're really supporting trying to get those trucks out on the road today.
I appreciate that. Just my final question is, one of the issues that I grapple with in the east side where I live is Tesla has the charging facilities that are fast chargers that I cannot utilize with my Kona. So one of the things that one of my dreams for infrastructure throughout California is that we, as an agency or maybe the state, can set a certain minimum requirement for fast chargers that are compatible for a lot of cars, like Android versus Apple technology, that sort of thing. Can we standardize the requirements for charging so that it applies to more people and we provide that funding? Are all the manufacturers using the same requirements?
I could let Jed and Arvind speak to that, but the effort is now ongoing with SAE to have a standardized protocol. But why don't we let Arvind? You had your hand up first.
Happy to chime in. And Senator, you'll be happy to know that the trucking industry is doing a much better job in terms of coalescing around the standards. So in North America, we are using the combined charging standard, and there's 2 versions, but it's really like swapping out the nozzles. So it's really nothing challenging. We're actually being very open about this when we're working with the utilities or, for example, the port authorities who are considering a publicly accessible charging site. Now going forward, there is the megawatt charging standard, which is being developed, and the industry is telling us that they think sometime next year, toward the end of the year, it might actually be a viable solution. However, it's one thing to make the technology work, but it's a completely different thing to produce components which are going to be certified and safe and produced at scale. So I think there's that movement, and I think the industry is going to make sure that there's some sort of backward compatibility between the standard connectors today and the new connectors tomorrow.
I appreciate everybody being so thoughtful about those important issues, because I know it might not be the exciting components, but it's really what's going to help make this so that more people can utilize the technology. And I'm looking at this, board members, as what could we do on our MOU discussions to help facilitate what the needs are. I recognize that going to all electric is not going to be a short process, but I think that we can do certain things on our side to help move that forward. So thank you so much for the time.
All right, thank you so much. I'll add my comments here. First of all, thanks to all of the manufacturers for joining us. I learned a lot today. I heard a few things that stood out to me. I heard an order placed is an order not placed is an order not delivered. And I certainly, that resonates with me. I heard Lacey say that manufacturers can't keep up with demands. The timelines are extended. There's a shortage across the supply chain. I heard of a memo that KW at Kenworth put out saying the very same thing last week. I heard Jed say there's significant, strong interest in zero emission electric vehicles. Batteries begin in October 2022, mid 2023 timeline if ordered by the end of 2020. But if ordered now, delivered mid 2023. We heard Bob talk about the Freightliners, zero emission vehicles available mid 2023. The near zero is available today. It could be up to a year turnaround due to supply chain, similar to what Lacey said. So what I hear in terms of the MOU, and that's the context in which we're speaking, the goal is the MOU is an agreement between AQMD and the ports on how we're going to get to cleaner air and what programs we're going to structure and how we're going to invest, the clean truck rates and things like that. And what I hear is that we need to get the orders in. I think we need to be realistic that an order placed by the end of 2022 should count because it's going to be very difficult to actually deliver the truck by 2022. So we need to incentivize buying as many of these trucks by the CARB 2022 deadline and ensure that CARB aligns with, hey, if you have the order in hand, the truck is purchased, then you are still eligible for those incentives, even if the truck is not delivered by 2022, because what we're seeing is that's just not realistic. And so I hope that staff can make sure as you're negotiating the MOU, you're also talking with CARB about the real challenges that we see here on both the zero emission side and the near zero emission side. The second thing I would say is that, these orders, I know there's a supply chain, I know there's already manufacturing and there's components that has to happen, but I wonder if, there's an incentive that we can create to produce some of these components locally, that where they don't have to be shipped. In Long Beach, for example, we have a history of aerospace and automotive manufacturing and facilities that need to be repurposed. I think the fact that we're, encouraging and incentivizing significant investment, initially $600 million into clean trucks, and after that, it'll be in the billions. Since we're making those types of investments, we should work with the ports and our local supply chain partners to figure out how we can incentivize the creation of those components here locally. And I would actually love to hear from some manufacturers on what you are doing here locally. And if there is an opportunity to do more locally. So if staff could speak to those two issues. One, the ability to incentivize having the order in hand by the end of 2022, that you're able to still count toward the CARB 2022 deadline. And from the manufacturers, what are the opportunities to produce and manufacture components locally? That was a question for staff.
Thanks, Chair. There was a lot there. So with regards to creating incentive funds, is that the question that you're asking about?
So two things. So the 2022 CARB deadline on trucks. So what we're hearing from the manufacturers is it's going to be very difficult to deliver by the beginning of 2022. If you get the order in, you can probably get something in 2023. But how do you make sure that we encourage companies to buy? Because what we don't want them to do is go buy diesel. How do we encourage them to go buy zero or near zero emission when they know that the truck can't be delivered? What we're hearing from the manufacturer can't be delivered by the end of 2022. Can we incentivize having the order in hand? Like get your order purchased, and that by having it in hand, then you are eligible for whatever incentives are developed?
I can answer that question, and I'll go first, and I'll have Matt clean up after me, if so to speak.
Sure.
Part of the challenge is CARB itself and
Right.
CARB's recognition of when those purchases are made and how they apply. So we actually have raised this issue with CARB, and we need to get their buy-in. Vice Mayor, you and I and Supervisor Kuehl were in a meeting where we had Leanne Randolph and Richard Corey, and we talked about this issue about sort of when would they accept the purchase of trucks through what period, in particular for the clean truck rate, as I recall.
Right.
And as I recall, the agreement was through the end of 2022. What wasn't clear was whether or not it was the actual purchase or the delivery. So we need to go back to
Right.
CARB and have that discussion. And I think you and perhaps some of the other board members that were part of that discussion would be well suited to have that with us.
Certainly, and that's what I'm getting at. I want to make sure that we're setting up, the trucking companies for success. If we say that, the clean truck rate, here are the details, here's the CARB rules, here's the AQMD rules. We need to know that it's actually attainable. We're not setting them up for failure. I think realistically saying you have, a year from now, end of 2022, to go get your purchases in. I think that's fair, right? But you have a deadline to have that order in hand. And we can do what we can to, I'm sure there's economies of scale when people order more and more. I'm sure the manufacturers will say that, but I think it's unreasonable to expect an incentive on something that can be delivered when we're hearing from the manufacturers today who are developing this technology that it may not happen next year. And so that's the point that that's really the point I want to lift up. And then I would just love to hear from some manufacturers. Can we build some of these components here locally? Is that possible? I want to see some of that happen.
Arvin?
Yeah.
Arvin or Jed, yeah.
Well, so the bad news. I mean, we have our dealerships, we have our services and other accompanying verticals, if you will, to support the deployment of electric trucks here in California, and we're growing this. No manufacturing in the state as of today, but I will tell you that we are making all our trucks in the US, and they're all being built in Virginia. And of course, we're sourcing the battery, but everything else is actually being built in the US on the East Coast. Our presence is more mid-Atlantic, but obviously I think we're seeing that the market here is very favorable and growing. So that might change, but I will tell you that the other parts of the value chain are very much here. We are investing in certifying our dealership with trained technicians, which is going to be extremely important as we have more and more of these trucks. We have the first certified Volvo certified dealership here in Fontana, and we hope to grow that. And we're working with a number of EVSPs to set some of the workforce development programs in place.
Okay. Well, I would just say, I think we should design, we should build, we should maintain. If we're buying the stuff, we're taking the impacts, we should get the economic benefits. I just feel that way. And thank you so much for, your realistic response. But I think we should be thinking about how we can develop closer to our ports and closer to this area. It's better on our air quality. It's better for our economy. So just take that back to your folks. We want to see you build more in California. Okay, so that's that. Now we're going to go to, we have the update on the Port MOU. Board Member Padilla Campos.
Thank you. I just wanted to really agree with what you're saying about having that order in hand and having some sort of credit for doing that. Through our TCC grant that kind of beautiful got, DOT ordered 14 electric buses, and it took over 2 years for them to come. And I don't even think they're all here yet, so we haven't been able to implement. But I do recognize that it takes a long time. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate what I heard today of the need for infrastructure, because we don't talk enough about that. And I think we right. need to. So I just want to make those quick comments. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me.
Certainly. Thank you. And infrastructure is a big part of this conversation. I think we certainly at this committee should take that on as well. We should get an update on that plan at some point in the future. Thanks so much. Let's get an update now. Let's get one seat. Let's get an update on the MOU conversation. Then we'll have our second round of public comment. Wayne?
I'm going to have Ian McMillan deliver that, Chair.
Ian?
Thank you very much. If I could get the slides pulled up, there's only a few of them. Give it one sec here. Super, thanks so much. So I think we got through a lot of the meat of the discussion. We did just update the committee, of course, about 2.5 weeks ago. So there hasn't been a whole lot that's happened since then to report on, but let me walk through it. So next slide, please. Great, thanks. So just very quick background in case there's folks here who haven't followed this the whole way. The board originally approved an approach to pursue an MOU back in May of 2018. There was extensive discussion for a couple years that was then paused in the early on in the pandemic. Those discussions have restarted in summer of this year. And of course, we provided that update last committee meeting. Next slide, please. What we heard at the last committee meeting really is that, and we've heard from some public comment again today, really that significant need to reduce emissions from all port sources. There is a very large amount of emission reductions that is needed from the ports in some fashion. And so on the order of about 20 tons per day of NOx in 2023 and 2031 to meet our attainment, the federal attainment standards. We of course know that port communities are experiencing disproportionately higher air impacts from these emissions. The Clean Truck Program is currently envisioned. We see that the world we're in today is different than when it was first proposed years back, and it's not really clear that that program as currently envisioned will provide surplus emission reductions. Looks like it would produce maybe some pretty slow turnover, but with CARS regulations that are upcoming, it's not clear how surplus emission reductions would happen there. We do see again that need to go something beyond the Clean Truck Program, and again, whether that's actions on trucks or actions on other measures, other vehicle types, we think that's really important. We heard that it's also important for port staff to be able to get some more authorization to talk beyond the Clean Air Action Plan. And what can be done beyond that? We know, of course, partnerships are really critical to with big lifts. It takes a lot of partners to move forward. And then, at the end of the day, really what we're looking for is emission reductions, right? That's really the whole point of the MOU. And we're particularly interested in near-term emission reductions. There could be, mechanisms in place for longer term measures, but we really need to have those near term measures. And on top of that, contingency measures, so that we're sure that should something happen, that we can still find ways to get emission reductions. Next slide. We have had some discussions since that last committee meeting, mainly just a few lighter touch points with port staff and district staff. And what we have heard is that the port staff has taken the message from the committee, and they've gone back and they're working on trying to see what they can do, but they really haven't been able to share anything as of yet. But they have said that they would get back to us when they have some proposed actions that they could take. And they are still interested in moving quickly, but they just aren't really ready to talk about it yet with us. Next slide. So just next steps, we of course are going to continue to outreach to additional stakeholders. We can report back to this committee, of course. And then in December, the December board meeting would be the 4-month timeline that the board had set in August. And so there would be an update at that point. That ends my presentation. Available for any questions.
Fantastic. Anything else, Wayne? All set?
Sorry, sir. We're all set.
Okay.
Next item up on the agenda is public comment.
All right. So we'll add our comment, our board member comments, and we'll close out with public comment. My comments are, so our last meeting, I believe, was 2 weeks ago. And I know that the message, the board, the committee's message was kind of heard loud and clear. I heard it echo back that you got to bring more than just what's in the Clean Air Action Plan, and that we need to see additional reductions. We need to see a structure to generate the revenue needed to turn around these trucks. And we need to go back to the board and tell them, give us more that we can come to the table for it. So I've heard that from both sides and both ports, and I look forward to, and I encourage them to get, let's talk turkey. Let's get back to the table. Bring what you can bring to make this work. I think, the formula still is we need to look at trucks, but also beyond trucks. We got to look at things like cargo handling equipment. We got to make sure that what we do, this is going to be a transition. We got to make sure that it is equitable and just. And I would love to hear about how those stakeholder meetings are going with the communities and with labor, and make sure that we're not leaving communities behind as we're making this transition to cleaner ports. I raised this last time, and I've talked about this. I would love to see how we can fast track funding to get funding up front to get as many orders in as possible. I think that's something that I would like to see with this MOU, a path to the $600 million needed to turn over these 6,000 trucks immediately, and a long-term vision for the 18,000 trucks across the region. I think that's something that is certainly within our power to do. And I want to see that spoken to and addressed in some way here. I also think that it's critical that, there's a contingency plan, that there's teeth in this MOU, so it stands up and that it's real. And so those are the things that I think, and I know everyone's listening, those are the things that I think are necessary in order to hold up this MOU and say that it's real, it gets us the reductions, it has a path, it represents a path to cleaning up our trucks, it has teeth, and it's just as it treats workers and communities. That's what I'm hoping for and what I'm looking for. And I'm looking toward my board members to see if they have any comments before we go back to public comment. Board member Padilla Campos.
I just want to say, I was not surprised that things are moving so slowly. When I got this report, I kind of knew this would happen without an IRS. And I think we also need to talk about the fact that the ports are now operating 24/7 and what that means, and just really pushes to the urgency of why we have to ensure that we keep pushing on this MOU if that's the direction we're going. We can't allow for too much time to pass, because like I said, the 24-hour operations, and trust me, I understand why that had to happen, right? I get it. But for that reason, we do need to ensure that we're not forgetting the communities that are being impacted now even more because of it. So I just wanted to bring that up and hope to see some movement, some serious movement at the next meeting. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm hoping for the very same. But while you raise that, I want to request staff that the Marine Ports Committee hear a report at the next meeting on the 24-hour port situation and what the impacts to air quality would be, and how we can factor that into whatever we're doing. Board Member Delgado.
I just want to support Board Member Padilla's comments. Obviously we've all seen that news, and it does seem to be a federal priority. So I just expect that this will be used as a reason why negotiations should be extended. And I do want to kind of understand if the federal government will translate that to, if there is a national need to go 24/7 at our ports, and I understand why, then that really does impact this MOU I'm assuming it will. So I just wanted to get a little more information on that as it evolves. I don't expect an answer today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, we'll go to public comment. So now we have a second public comment here. We have 5 hands raised. Starting with Ramon Ponce de Leon.
So excuse me, Mr. Vice Chairman Richardson, this is Barbara Baird from Legal. Could we clarify? I know the first speaker has had his hand up for quite some time. So this public comment period we're having now is on agenda item 1C, and there will be yet another public comment for items not on the agenda?
Yes.
All right, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. No problem. All right, so Ponce de Leon. All right, go ahead and unmute.
Now, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, item 1C is the MOU, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, board members. Ramon Ponce de Leon, I'm president for ILW Local 13, the Longshore. I want to say first and foremost that we are always advocating for cleaner air. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I saw the smog. I saw the difference it is now. Thank you very much. And as we move forward, there's a couple of things. We have to get together with the ports. The ports and this group has to get together and have to come up with an MOU. I mean, to start doing regulations is meaning it's an adversarial move. We have to get it together. We got to come together somehow and find a way. Just to remind everybody that the governor waived the app berth regulations twice this summer. Twice. Once last summer. That means burn it dirty at the vessels. Why? Because there's not enough power just to plug in a ship. That doesn't discount all the other infrastructure that we are behind. Now, is this the cart before the horse? How is a company going to go invest in electric trucks when you can't even charge them any place? Because that's the ultimate goal, is to get to zero. We get it. So if the infrastructure is not there, we live in a free democracy here, where companies can invest into things that are going to make them money. Why would they invest in something that's going to be a failure? If they can't charge their truck someplace, then how are you going to force them to charge? Now, here's the deal. What about the little guy? The guy that just owns the truck. You're going to make him pay $250,000? They're buying $50,000 trucks and they're standing in line right now, right, on this diesel. So I understand that we need to get there, but putting the cart before the horse is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And why? I don't understand why we are not pushing for rail infrastructure when we could put 300 cans in a 5 to 6 hour period using electric top handlers to load it on a rail, 300 moves, that's 300 trucks left off the road. And if you can electrify some type of engine for the train, we're not talking about rail. We keep talking about trucks. How many more trucks are going to go on the road? I coming off the 91, there's only one lane for cars. Everything else is trucks idling. So we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're setting the economy for a failure. We're 40% of the nation's cargo. If we go down in Southern California at ports, then the California economy will sink. The economic impact to the communities, not only the environmental, but the economic impact is a responsibility.
All right, thank you. Next we have Harvey Eder.
Good afternoon. Am I being heard?
We can hear you.
Okay. My name's Harvey Eder. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition and like-minded folks. We've been coming to the district now 36 years, talking about, solar conversion, about climate. And we put in the 16 solar New Deal in the plan, and it was not evaluated. And right after that, we started contacting BYD and then Tesla about trucks. BYD was making, they've made, thousands of electric vehicles over in Asia and stuff. And they said, and they're making them out in Palmdale, and they said they could manufacture 5,000 a year. All right. And they were talking like half the prices we're hearing now, but something went south. But so, and now, Tesla's in Austin, I hear they're going to Austin. All right. Well, we should have them here. And so we're talking about doing this stuff here, right? And we put in a proposal. There was money available from fines and whatnot to the air district, and we put in a proposal, and we were not funded nothing. We were told next time. All right, this is next time. And we also talked about working. This was to be owned and controlled by the workers and the communities, and low income especially, and with BYD and the state. So most of the equity would go to those in need. There's a lot of stuff happening in economics now. One thing is Thomas Piketty and Piketty's out of France, and Saez and Zimmer out of UC Berkeley. All right, these guys are on equity. They're probably going to get a Nobel soon. And that inequity, there's been no increase in wages in the last 40, 50 years. In the last 15, it's gotten a lot worse. Okay, so we've got big problems systemically with our political economic system, our cultural, social, anthropological, blah, blah. Anyway, we got to change. We got to do it now. We put in this plan, and we got run out of federal court, okay? And on the 3rd of December in 19, and we got 6 weeks to file federal tort. We're looking into the 6-hour statute and look at other ways of going. But 30 years ago, the feds that came in and put in a plan, because this district has been out for 40 years, environmental groups and whatnot came up the 6th of October and said, last year, and said that they had 9 violations. They only had 3 violations of the Clean Air Act, and that they had actually made 26 over the first 9 months of the year. Okay, they're way out. They're in violation. It's on. They're never going to meet these things. They ignored solar. They never evaluated either the district or CARB.
All right. Thank you. Next, we have Chris Chavez.
Yes, this is Chris Chavez, Deputy Policy Director at Coalition for Clean Air and member of the Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach AB 617 Community Steering Committee. Coalition for Clean Air continues to support an indirect source rule over a memorandum of understanding. That the governor waived the at-birth rule as part of the extreme heat episodes, or in response to the extreme heat episodes, shows we need to get every ounce of emission reduction from the ports. The Port of San Diego's recent zero emission announcement should really set the standard for all ports. And I do want to recognize that the San Pedro Bay ports were leaders in the past, but the same cannot be said of today. I appreciate the call for this going beyond trucks and getting into cargo handling equipment. However, I'd point back to my experience being on the Port MOU calls before the breakdown of negotiations in early 2020. During that time, the calls devolved into an endless conversation of what would be covered by the MOU and what wouldn't be covered. Most community comments through the AB 617 process indicated support for an indirect source rule. I also want to express my appreciation to the board members who mentioned the change towards 24-hour operations. We do need to consider the impacts of expanding port operations. I'm curious as to if there was any consultation with AQMD from the administration. We would oppose the extension of the MOU timeline to accommodate this federal action. Again, if the state and federal government can disregard clean air rules, who's the last backstop? That's AQMD. At best, the MOU as envisioned by the ports maintains the status quo. At worst, which I'm inclined to believe, the ports are slow walking this. The district needs to show leadership. Just like we saw under Reclaim, voluntary compliance is not going to cut it. And again, we continue to support an indirect source rule over the flawed MOU. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Next is Robert Nadoff.
Good afternoon, Chair Richardson, members of the committee. My name is Rob Notoff with the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, where we proudly represent over 800,000 hardworking women and men across all industries in Los Angeles County. And I'm calling in today on behalf of my boss, President Ron Herrera, to express our desire to move forward with a robust MOU process at the port. And we'd like to express our sincere thanks and gratitude to the staff at AQMD, sincerely Wayne Nastry, for taking the time to meet with us and listen to labor's priorities and concerns at the Federation. At the LA Fed, we believe that the MOU process allows for more flexibility for everybody in terms of worker protections. And we have the full faith and confidence that we can achieve our labor, environmental, and business goals if we're able to collaboratively work on a framework that has consensus from all of the above parties. We believe in an MOU process that has real teeth, and we believe that real buy-in and ownership over the process from community stakeholders is paramount for successful implementation and, more importantly, execution of any successful MOU. Real buy-in will lead to better environmental standards and investments in zero emissions technologies. It'll lead to reduced rates of misclassification by ensuring that investments in zero emission technologies are tied to proper worker classification and good wages. Real buy-in will help to make sure that electrical vehicle manufacturing and electrical infrastructure are done by a skilled and trained workforce. And real buy-in on an MOU process will ultimately lead to a cleaner, more efficient port complex in our estimation. So thanks again to the AQMD staff for taking the time to really listen and ask questions around labor's concerns. We feel, again, that the MOU process creates the more robust and flexible process for achieving all of our goals. And we remain hopeful that we will get an MOU done in the limited window of time that remains. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, Fernando Guyton.
Good afternoon, Fernando Gaitan. I commented earlier on an earlier item. I'm with Earth Justice. So I'm going to keep my comments brief for this item. It does bear repeating. I really want to thank also the thought behind that we heard today behind really focusing on building out a zero emissions infrastructure, and want to applaud board members Padilla Campos and Delgado, and to a certain extent Vice Chair, Co-Chair Richardson, for really thinking through those issues. I think that is where the focus needs to be. One of the things that we're hearing here is that staff is ready to go. Staff is ready to think through these issues, and there's a reason for that. The AQMD's mission is to protect our air, and more importantly, to protect public health. As an agency that's solely dedicated to improving our air quality, it is uniquely situated to really think through these issues and think through the problems that 24/7 operations of the ports are going to cause. I implore you to really let the staff shift to thinking about an indirect source rule that will really capture all of the emissions reductions we need to see at the ports to really make a difference in our communities. The time for delay has already passed, and we can't afford even further delay in light of current circumstances. it's all the more reason why we should double down on thinking through a regulatory approach to this complex problem. The ports have their hands tied, and while several staff members at the ports may be well-intentioned, their focus is on logistics and goods movements. And for them to now be saddled with also simultaneously thinking through these proposals seems counterproductive. Let staff do their job. Let staff work with constituents. Let staff work with stakeholders, including those from the ports and labor, to really think through regulatory measures that will get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you. To a certain extent, Elliot Gonzalez.
Yeah, and just like hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, just like the previous speaker mentioned, I spoke earlier, so I'm going to try to keep my comments brief. I just want to say, as we're going through this MOU, that the community, when we first brought this up, we were talking about an indirect source rule. And so it kind of goes back to my point of like, oh, I already mentioned several times at several meetings, stop calling natural gas near zero because it's inaccurate, right? This is a meeting about the air quality and climate change, and it's already pretty hot. So, let's act like this is serious. Let's act like we're all intelligent adults here, and just try to speak in the same language. So, we said we want an indirect source rule. And from what I could tell, based on the previous conversations, this has sort of created an unnecessary extra time lapse in our ability to create effective policy. I don't see the ports saying, oh yeah, we're going to agree to an MOU that guarantees good jobs and uplifts the wages of the port workers and electrifies the port. No, I don't see that happening within like a year or 6 months or whatever. And the thing is, you're already far behind compliance. We just had this big retreat, and the federal government was there to tell you, oh, this is sad, this is severe. We almost might need to consider adding a whole new category to how far beyond unattainment we already are. So I'm just worrying about where are you guys at? Do you honestly believe that the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach is going to electrify the port and create a fair trade jobs contract for the whole community within the next 6 months, and that's what you did, and good for you? You really truly believe that is more important than what the community has already said? We want an indirect source rule, and we believe that this is the best way to achieve attainment. This is the best way to get the good jobs that we need to electrify the ports, create the electric infrastructure we have desperately needed for decades since they built that thing. So I just want to remind you what you already know. You're getting an F when it comes to from the federal government. They were here telling you you're failing. You're failing your constituents. So well, I'm just here to remind you of that, and we'll see how these MOU discussions play out. Thank you.
All right, next we have Yasi.
Hello, this is Yasi, Senior Campaign Representative with Sierra Club National. And my concerns are regarding the MOU process, and being that we haven't heard from the ports and knowing that business is definitely busy at the ports. I think this is just a common theme we constantly see. At the last meeting, under the guise of the Clean Air Action Plan, we didn't really hear anything substantial besides we've been doing it already. And I'm concerned that the MOU process is going to just prolong that. On the contrary, an ISR process isn't going to be an adversarial thing, but something to facilitate actual infrastructure investments, actual on-site emissions reductions, which is clearly in this agency's jurisdiction. This agency is a convener between public health, business and industry, and environmental stewardship. I don't necessarily think what we're doing here is going to hurt our port communities, and I really encourage staff to look at possible regulations while we're also talking about an MOU, as they have in the past with things like the warehouse indirect sources rule. We cannot afford cancer rates at the highest levels at ports communities, as the MATE studies shown. It's only going to get worse. And it's not going to be an easy, smooth road either way. When we upgraded technologies 100 years ago, that didn't happen overnight. And again, that's why we need rulemaking and high standards passed and implemented right now so that we can get these processes going. And I think that's where the Sierra Club's intentions at in this space, at the state level, and in all at the federal level for air emissions reduction. So I hope that the MOU process can give some clarity. And I wish the ports were here, frankly, to deliver what they could share with us. Thank you.
All right, next is Mandira.
Thank you all. It's again Mandira. I'm with the Pacific Environment. I'm a climate campaigner working on the Clean Ports campaign. I wanted to see if there are any significant updates on the MOU, but I don't think anyone is not surprised that there aren't any significant updates. We have seen this before, and this is what I'm expecting for the next meeting as well. This is why I want to take this time to highlight the importance of ISR. South Coast AQMD is a regulatory body, and this AQMD regulating what they're supposed to do is not an adversarial action. That is what they're supposed to do. So I encourage everyone, let AQMD do what AQMD does. That is important. At the same time, I want to again highlight, while we're talking about this, there are 50 odd ships waiting outside the ports, continuing to spill particulate matter and NOx and SOx. It is important that we are actually taking a look at regulating ocean-going vessels at this time. Ocean-going vessels are still using heavy fuel oil, and there is no end in sight. So it is important that ports and AQMD, I know AQMD is mostly focused on stationary. However, it is important to keep that conversation in mind. Also, hovercraft also continuing to spill a lot of NOx and SOx and diesel particulate matter. And there is a CARB rule coming up. I hope there is a change in that as well. However, it is important that we look at the whole, not just the trucks in this matter. Also, this is a really good opportunity to use the Clean Truck Fund to expand electrification in the ports, like I said earlier. That's why we also advocate a higher Clean Truck Fund rate, $70 per TEU or higher, so we can actually make some changes, move towards a electrified future, because at this point, we are not going anywhere. Again, thank you so much for time. Have a good one.
All right, thank you. I'll just add some final comments as we wrap up. Thank you everyone for your public comment. I think I want to put some things in perspective. I think the last ports committee meeting wasn't a full month. It wasn't a full month since our last one. This was a special AQMD meeting we had. So it's actually been 2 weeks. Within those 2 weeks, there have been discussions based on the feedback from the last ports committee meeting. We said, go back to your boards, get more, come back. There's also been a number of stakeholder meetings that have taken place. One was referenced today with some labor stakeholders, some longshoremen, a separate meeting. So if staff could just give a more clear update on what's taken place in the last 2 weeks, and when you plan to hear back from the ports on those very specific things that we reported at the last committee meeting, so we can set some realistic expectations for how this process actually works.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would say that you're right. The last time we had a ports committee meeting, that was about a little over 2 weeks ago. During that time, there have been ongoing staff meetings that have met on a weekly basis. I will say those meetings have been with the ports, but I will say that at each of those 2 meetings, there really wasn't a substantive discussion, because as we understand it, the port staff are working on something to bring back to us, and they're trying to get approval to talk to us. So we haven't heard anything as of yet directly in those discussions. I would also point out that in the intervening 2 weeks, I did have the chance to meet with the executive director of the Port of Long Beach, the commission president, and we had an opportunity to talk about some concerns and moving forward. And I would say that there was optimism that they would come to some type of agreement that they wanted to do more. And as you also noted yesterday, we had a number of meetings. I had a number of meetings with labor groups, as well as longshoremen and others. And so I think there was a lot of good information that's been exchanged with regards to some of the specific provisions that people would like to see. We heard a lot of those today. We heard about, for instance, accelerating the Clean Truck Fund. We heard about improving cargo handling equipment. We heard about on-dock rail. I think there are a number of different topics. We do look forward to meeting with the port staff in the coming weeks. I think what I'd like to do is to, move to a regular schedule where we actually have the time to continue to advance these discussions with the ports. And so that's one of the things that we're hopeful that we can make this time regular. But frankly, we've got to make sure that we've got a quorum available, and you co-chair along with Councilman Buscaino as well. So we're trying to juggle schedules, content, and availability. But I assure you we're doing quite a bit in the meantime.
Great. Well, I just thought it was important to just tease out, this wasn't a month between the meeting. I actually have seen a lot of work take place on behalf of AQMD staff in engaging with stakeholders in the ports in the last 2 weeks. And what we asked was for them to go back to their boards, and they're going through that process, getting additional authority to put more on the table. And that's sort of the process. I also want to just be clear, as of right now, I know there was a discussion earlier on trucks, near zero, zero. We haven't really even we've been focusing on the money in a neutral sense and haven't really picked a favorite, one or the other. But what we have heard is that zero is the priority. And I don't think there's any disagreement on that. I think on near zero, the conversation has just been this 2022 deadline. There's a certain amount of purchases between now and then. And that's the reality. If a company chooses one or the other, there certainly has to be a policy conversation about what exemptions look like and all of that, but that hasn't happened yet. And so I just want to be clear with folks. What we're talking about is a number of maybe 5 or 6 key areas that have to come together in order to deliver an MOU. And sometimes that requires you to go back to your board. Sometimes it means stakeholder outreach. Sometimes it means engaging with manufacturers and seeing what's technically feasible to make sure you have a document that works. And the hope, someone said earlier, it's not likely to have an MOU that prioritizes workers and electrification and clean air. That's what we're actually shooting for. And so it's okay to not be optimistic about that, but that's what we should be striving for. And that's why this takes a little bit of time, but I'm optimistic still that we'll get there. So thanks a lot. And now we have our second public comment to close out the meeting. All right, I see one hand on our final public comment. Harvey Etter. Harvey, are you there?
Hello. Hi. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm Harvey Etter. I'm talking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. So kind of like trying to take an overview. One number I heard recently is that going into Scotland, the Glasgow COP26, the end of this month and into next, that right now we use 100 million barrels of oil a day. And the way we're going, by 2050, we'll be at 55. It doesn't work. We've waited. Okay, I was the first environmental studies student in 1970 at UC Santa Cruz. All right, and with Dr. Dick Cooley, and he helped save the polar bear. He wrote books about it and met with youth from Alaska and up north, and we met with the Russians, and so we wouldn't hunt them all the time and kill them. Now we are. The north is melting, and it's heating up, not just twice as fast as the rest of the planet, but like 3 times to maybe 6 times. And that's the difference in temperature from there, and the tropic. It's slowing down the jet stream, and that's causing some of these extremes and fires and floods and high temperatures, 121 in Siberia and Canada. Look, we got a Defense Production Act. It's time to get serious. We don't know if we're going to be defaulting on our country, or if we're going to be, what's going to happen in the future. Okay. The denial and stuff, that's serious stuff. So I'm real concerned. And I think we could all put our thinking caps on and our working caps and try to work together. By the way, I'm a member of the AFL. I worked up north in Alaska. I worked construction, and I'm a nurseryman. We had tree nurseries doing living Christmas trees, transplanted 10,000 a year. Anyway, it's time to do this stuff. And I've been doing solar a long time, like 50 years, since 73, the October War, 48 years ago. All right. So it's time to work together and work this out. And we can the board. This district has been going towards natural gas. That's the trucks that they wanted.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, that satisfies the agenda. Thank you all for participating. I think that's it. Thanks everyone for participating in today's Marine Ports Committee meeting. Certainly had a great, robust discussion, and we'll see you at the next one.